Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, a podcast for novices and masters alike. I am here with the co-master, Josh Harrison, line developer of Earthdawn, and today on this podcast, we will be discussing all things archerial, and because we're going to get into the discussion of archers.
Targetical.
Targetical. I like that one. That works for me. Thank you for keeping the trope alive.
Well, I figured I can't get you to stop, so I might as well join in.
If you can't beat them, join them. Yeah, might as well. But if you'd like us to answer any questions, provide any feedback for you at all, or just tell us we're doing a bang-up job, we'd like those as well. Feel free to email us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. Other than that, I think we can kind of dive right in, or at least get on target with our
clever
discussion of archers. Yes.
What you did there, I see it.
See it, I did. Yeah, so archers, one of the classic, good old-fashioned, available in just about every fantasy role-playing game out there.
Yeah, to one extent or another. I mean, obviously there is a strong legendary, even outside of Earthdawn, there's a strong sort of folkloric and legendary and mythological aspect to the archetype of the archer. You know, Robin Hood, obviously the first example that immediately comes to mind.
It was also one of the second weapons humans ever built, actually. Well, third, I think, because we had the atlatl. I think the spear was second, and then we figured out how to actually projectile. So I think archery was like third.
Yeah, and you know, plenty of other examples where bows and archery are significant, both historically and mythologically. So
totally, different
games in the past have succeeded to greater or lesser extents in having the true archer melee. The true ranged focus character be successful to one extent or another, you know, but this obviously there is a very strong, you know, focused discipline just on that here in Earthdawn.
Yes. And I like that as an archer, you can, if you want to, instead of using a bow and arrows, you can use a crossbow instead.
Yeah. It is not exclusive to any particular ranged weapon. You know, whether bow or crossbow or sling or even thrown weapons. Mm-hmm. Although mechanically throwing weapons are not great for someone who has the ability to turn all of that stuff into ranged weapons as well. Just from a factor of potential range as well as ammunition. You know, obviously, you know, you are able to carry a lot more arrows or crossbow bolts as opposed to, say, throwing daggers. Although the magic of the archer is equally applicable to those as well. So that's actually something that you could potentially, from a creative standpoint, not necessarily as the focus of your character, but if you are in a situation where you don't have your primary ranged weapon, you can apply it to throwing weapons as well. Even maybe an improvised one where you pick up a good rock and just throw it.
Yes, because the Legend of William Tell is all about
throwing. Oh, there you go. William Tell.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
It took me a minute to sort of think of that one. My subconscious was working on it in the background, percolating somewhere. But to the other point of archers in Earthdawn especially is that the discipline is about the path of finding the end point. So that's why it's all ranged, is because the path you're going to walk is not just here. It's seeing a target, getting to it, be it a life goal, be it a opponent that needs to be taken down, something along those lines. You constantly are looking for the next goal or the next target to reach.
Right. The essay,
that is their path.
Yeah, the essay that's in the original Adept's Way and is reproduced in the 3rd edition Player's Companion does have a very strong focus and is one of the better examples, really, of the discipline as mindset, because the archer who writes that is very focused on everything is a like the bow and the target and the missile is used as a metaphor for everything.
Yes.
And you know, so that's strong. I am not necessarily quite such a purist myself in the sense that, that is the only way to approach it. Mm-hmm. But there is I think for all archers, whether they focus on the bow or the crossbow, even the Adept's Way actually talks about the difference in philosophy between the traditional bow archer and the crossbow archer. in terms of how they approach things. That the crossbow archer tends to maybe not be quite so direct because the crossbow is made of multiple pieces working together in harmony, and so tends to maybe not be quite so blunt and direct.
It muddies the waters.
Yeah. And that's fine. I really think that the core that you should come away with when you're looking at any of those essays, whether in the original Adept's Way, whether in Questors, whether in Mystic Paths, all of which have these in-character essays from a practitioner or follower of the thing being discussed, I think the biggest thing to take away is that for all of these, it is a very personal, very philosophical approach to things to a certain extent, and that following a discipline is not merely just something that it's not just something that you do. It is a calling. It is a way of life, and it's really however you choose to define that for your character within, obviously, the framework of the discipline is not necessarily wrong. Obviously, there are some really unusual takes that might be hard to make work, like a beastmaster that doesn't like animals,
Yeah.
or an air sailor that's afraid of heights, things like that.
Go for the role playing. On those.
The amount to which you dedicate yourself to a strong philosophical approach to your discipline is a matter of personal comfort and decision and what works for the table. If you are really going into a hardcore deep role-playing angle, that can certainly be something that really allows for exploration of character and can even drive some conflict or discussion among characters in the same group. If everybody has these really strong philosophical approaches to things, someone who has, say, the wizard's sort of more analytical bent coming into conflict maybe with the archer more direct and to the point and not wanting to overly belabor or overanalyze the situation can certainly cause some interesting role-playing dynamics in a group. And of course, obviously, I'm referring to two that we have discussed so far or are discussing rather than going into some of the others.
Yes.
But you can see that kind of aspect coming into play if you choose to be the sort of people that are diving into that.
I always wanted to make an archer who literally shot first and asked questions later, if at all. But I haven't made that character yet, so I will get there. So anything held over from the Karma Ritual from other additions to this one?
You know what?
All new?
Looking back, I was kind of flipping through some of the others from our discussion the other day, and I'm pretty sure that most of the Karma Rituals really didn't get modified much at all from the original version.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, it's not even that. It's more of now 6 years on, going back and looking at the player's guide and going, man, there is so much that we have learned since working on that book that would definitely approach differently and maybe work a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things that I didn't feel like needed any work at the time. And I don't think that it necessarily needs work now, but
that's fair.
Just taking a fresh look at some things and trying to maybe recast it to seem a little bit less one true way-ish, that space permitting, and I don't know that there is space, to be honest. It's a pretty packed book. But to maybe have a couple of different options or, a couple of different examples for each of them so that people could see that it is something that they can customize and work on their own.
Yeah. I think only one sentence in that would be needed for either a Karma Ritual or an Artisan skill, which is feel free to make your own or discuss it with your game master to alter your Karma Ritual in so-and-so manner to, really take ownership of it and make it part of your character.
I mean, it does say that. If you go back to the description of Karma Ritual back before we get into any of the full discipline write-ups, it does say that it's a sampled ritual. The player, while there are many similarities between the rituals practiced by adepts of the same ritual discipline, every Karma Ritual is unique. Individuals will adapt their ritual to fit their personal vision, and players are encouraged to create unique Karma Rituals. So I still think that whereas the artisan skills that are given, there were like 2 or 3 examples for each of them, and obviously you kind of only pick one, and so obviously it's like, here are the common ones, you can pick this or do another. The Karma Ritual does not necessarily show that same degree of potential creative flexibility.
Yep, but I still think that the Karma Rituals are one of the more
Oh
fascinating
yeah,
things to do.
they're great.
love
I have nothing against the Karma Rituals.
Oh, no.
But I remember back in our discussion, I think it was when we've talked about Air Sailor, the first of the disciplines that we talked about, of wanting to maybe not have the Karma Ritual be something that would be restricted in terms of when or how you could do it for the most part.
You are correct.
And I think outside of a couple of them, obviously the Archers one is tough to do if you're in tight quarters. In some respects,
if you're in prison somewhere.
but still.
But I think, even if you could modify it a little bit.
Yeah.
To say, I'm going to devise something inside. So, let's say you're in prison somewhere. You're in a 8 foot by 8 foot room with bars around, but you still have your clothes. You could somehow fashion some kind of tension on a pant leg or an elbow or something like that to actually fire a projectile at a target. So you could at least try that.
And even conceptually, I think ultimately the point of the Karma Ritual is a way for the adept to get in touch with the fundamental underpinnings of his personal vision of the discipline.
Yes.
And as long as that is being done and expressed, even day to day, there could be some minor variations that happen in it, especially as they advance in circle and start getting more abilities that they could bring to bear in terms of how they achieve whatever that task is.
Mm-hmm. I listened to a podcast on some other topic recently, and they were talking about the new wave of transcendental meditation. And so I think Earthdawn was way ahead of this new fad that they've been doing transcendental meditation for every single discipline for the last.
Well, I don't know that I would necessarily consider. I mean, there is definitely a meditative aspect to the Karma Ritual, and its function sort of within the narrative of the game setting.
Yeah.
And transcendental in a sense that you are sort of getting in touch with something much broader and deeper than the mere physical. You are tapping into
the
magical
that makes you. Yeah. So I thought I'd pull that one out of left field and throw everybody for a loop there. So in that regard, we can just start on the half magic with archers, because they can use half magic when caring for ranged weapons and to recognize different types of ranged weapons, ammunition, or their creators.
Yeah, I would think that with the strong emphasis on crafts and craft work within the setting, as far as a creative outlet and a way that some people believe it shows that you're not tainted or corrupted by the horrors, that again, we're not really dealing with a society, an industrialized society. So the work, the products made by individual bowyers or weaponsmiths or whatever would have distinctive characteristics or marks to identify who made them. And I imagine that for archers, they would be able to recognize the marks or the distinctive indicators of someone, of people who craft bows. And archers certainly would not be unusual for them to have the skills to create their own ranged weapons, as a possible artisan craft skill for them to do that. I don't know that I would go so far as to allow them to fully create them with half magic, but it would definitely be something that would be appropriate. And obviously, different archers would have notable defining characteristics of the arrows and stuff that they use as well. So when you're dealing with, we talked about adept population, I think at some point, especially when you start dealing with larger and, more powerful and more famous individuals, that their stories and the distinguishing marks would become sort of known among the lore of the followers of that discipline.
Yeah. So I like the idea of their half magic being involved in the use and the care and the restoration of, because that's what this is their tool.
Yeah.
This is their everyday usable tool. And you want to make sure that, yeah, this is a good one. I may upgrade this weapon eventually, and I got to know how to take care of it, spot somebody else's work as well, because this is their thing.
Yep.
So,
and then there are the important attributes of dexterity and perception.
You got to see the target, got to be able to hit the target.
Yep. And along with the dexterity and the sort of iconic things that go along with at least a traditional bow archer, is the speed as well. Although from a practical game mechanic standpoint, there is no real speed advantage to one type of weapon over another. Still, archers do tend to be, because they tend to have the high perception and don't rely quite so much on strength or toughness. So they can go even a little bit heavier into the dexterity than some other combat discipline types might.
Yeah.
But yeah, they tend to be fast.
Agreed. So my former co-host wanted to make a archer, and he always makes orcs, but he wanted to make an archer, and he showed me a video of a guy who studied some old texts on how fast an archer could actually be in combat, because the legends of they could fire this many arrows in a certain amount of time, and this army was overwhelmingly fast. So the archer's name is Lars. Just go onto an internet search engine and look up Lars the Archer, and you'll find
I've seen
a
some
number
of
of
his
his
stuff.
videos. Yeah, he can tumble, dive, and do with the rest of them, and he is insanely fast and pretty darn accurate. And it looks like he's got no form or style, but he is really, really good. And I said, wait for 4th edition. We'll see what we can do. So, but the cool thing, archers get one of the best free talents ever. And I know this used to be a spell.
No,
but
it was always a talent.
Oh, I remember there was a spell.
Because it's an archer. It's an archer ability. Call missile. It was a talent in 1st edition. It was always a talent because it doesn't make any sense for it to have been a spell. And why would an archer have had it?
No, I was trying to think of.
I don't know what you're trying to think of, but call missile. Call missile was always a talent. It is very flavorful.
Oh, weapon back is what I was thinking.
Oh, that's what you're thinking. Yep. Okay.
I was thinking weapon back. Sorry.
Which is similar but not the same.
Yes. So I knew there was something in there.
Yeah. Call missile is really flavorful in terms of what it can do. It makes a lot of sense from a sort of magical ability standpoint that an archer would be able to call his arrows back.
Yes.
That's or bolts or whatever. That's not an unusual, like, it's not a stretch. That's actually a concept that has appeared in fiction before to a certain extent. But the problem is, and again, this sort of feeds into the why did we go with free talents for some stuff? It's not something that is necessarily useful. It depends on how much of a stickler you are about tracking ammunition and encumbrance and how many arrows are damaged or made useless as a result of the fight and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And in the 1st edition, where the talent selections at each circle were fixed, it was, you just put it in there kind of early and people could take it or not as they wanted, which is fine. When you get into the 3rd edition talent option paradigm, it becomes one of those that if you require a character to take it by being a disciplined talent, then there is a perception that if it's not going to come into play frequently, that it's sort of a wasted slot and you have to put points into increasing it. Opinions on that are mixed. Whatever. And so then, okay, you make it an option, but then how many times is it going to actually be picked up by somebody as an option when you have other potentially better,
cooler
choices? And so consequently, the archer then, at least in the 3rd edition setup, loses a really kind of cool, flavorful ability. So let's give it to them for free. Basically, it's not, it doesn't overbalance combat. Basically, it's just kind of I know that there's some feeling that the 4th edition where we started just kind of tossing free stuff in there as a whatever is, some people are not necessarily fond of that one way or the other. I can respect that as a design choice, as an intention. But it's one of those things. It's let's give them something that is flavorful and appropriate and doesn't unbalance things one way or the other, and then they can use it if they need it, but they don't have to feel like they are wasting resources on it. And that's really where a lot of the like free choices came from, not only with the free talents, but some of the other stuff that we're given for free. Is I recognize that there is a certain mindset where if you are not, like, when you have resource to spend, in this case legend points to increase your abilities, that there can be within a certain mindset a resentment, for lack of a better term, that can come up from, oh, I need to spend these points on this thing that I don't really, not necessarily don't like,
utilize.
But that I don't really, I don't utilize, that I don't whatever. And so I resent having to spend what feels to be a limited resource in order to increase that.
Yeah. It's not like it doesn't have limitations. It has a certain has a certain range for you to call your weapon back. It has to be relatively straight path. It can't go around corners and stuff. So it's not game breaking if they get it for free.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a cool effect, and I'm okay with a little bit of panache.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that. And archers really have some panache.
They can.
They should.
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't have any issue with column missile being free. A free talent. That makes all sense to me. Talk about the durability.
Durability 5, because basically
Yeah.
because of the they get a free talent, so therefore they are durability 5. They are not built or intended to be in close combat. Their reliance on dexterity and speed means that they should be trying not to get hit in the first place.
Yes.
And so consequently do not have the long-term stamina durability of Sky Raiders or Warriors or Swordmasters.
Yeah.
And so they get that specialist middle-of-the-road durability rating.
Mm-hmm. Makes all kinds of sense to me. They're in the fight, but not up close and personal. Leading into the
First circle karma ability. Yeah. All of the specialists get a karma ability at first circle that ties into their theme. Remember, the air sailor gets the ability to spend karma on any action they take on an airship.
Yes.
So that's a similar thing here with the archer, is they get a karma ability that basically relates to one of their core concepts, in this case being they may spend a karma point on perception tests that rely on sight. Not any perception test, but specifically ones that rely on sight.
Yeah. My party would be bleeding karma on that one like crazy. Especially for something they didn't make a roll on. Can I try that again with karma? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. So, discipline talents, these actually are pretty straightforward at first circle.
Yeah.
I mean, avoid blow.
Avoid blow. Yeah, again, talking about the speed and, desire to really not be mixing it up, that in some respects, an archer who is engaged in melee has in some sense failed.
I agree.
From a conceptual standpoint. But avoid blow, obviously, there are going to be times when it is important for you to not get hit. And avoid blow actually can be used on ranged attacks as well. So
as long as you see it coming, you can get out of the way.
So it is a very appropriate and very useful defensive talent to get right out of the gate.
And I agree that it's not an option. This is a discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because your job is to hit the target, not to be the target. So yes, you want to get out of the way. Missile weapons,
obviously,
big H, yeah.
Obviously, I mean, if your whole concept is around shooting things, you better have your talent that lets you shoot things.
Exactly. So moving on, Mystic Aim. I've always loved that one.
Yeah, Mystic Aim is a talent that's existed from the very beginning. Obviously, the exact specifics of how it works have varied a little bit, but it basically is to enhance your accuracy. You basically
paint your target.
Yeah, you effectively paint your target and get a bonus to your attack tests as a result. Of course, higher attack test result means you're more likely to get extra successes, which translates to extra damage. So it's
really impressive.
Yeah, it's really
impressive
useful.
Shot later. So Mystic Aim, like I said, my cohort just calls it, I'm going to paint my target. Okay, paint your target.
Yep.
And you're good. Thread weaving, because everyone gets
everyone gets their thread weaving at first circle now.
And True Shot.
True Shot is, I believe, the only talent certainly the only novice tier talent, but perhaps the only talent in the entire first 8 circles, and possibly all 15 for the core disciplines, that explicitly allows a character to spend more than 1 karma on a test.
I concur, because I can't remember, because
there are some situations with combinations of talents and karma abilities that allow you to maybe spend 2 or possibly 3 karma on a test, but true shot is when you absolutely positively need to make that shot. This is the talent that you use. It is also one of the few talents, and again, might be the only one, but one of the few talents that explicitly allows you to spend karma after the fact if the test has failed.
Yes.
That basically you can choose to spend.
You will hit as long as you have karma.
As long as you've got karma, in theory you will hit. True Shot in 4th edition is limited a little bit in that you can't spend more additional points of karma than you have ranks in True Shot. So it is still possible, so that's basically to give the rank a reason to do something. I think in 1st edition, True Shot was itself its own attack test, as opposed to just being how it is in 4th edition, where it's you can spend this many additional points of karma. One of the things that we kind of tried to do was cut back a little bit on the number of separate talents that were their own attack test to do things.
That makes sense.
Because that's kind of duplication. I can understand maybe in one sense why you might, but again, it's it seems kind of weird in one sense that, okay, I am a master archer with rank 7 in missile weapons, and then I hit the next circle and I get an ability that's a new type of attack, and I'm awful at it. I can't build off of my existing knowledge and ability with missile weapons in order to use this. I've been tinkering in the back of my mind with a really, really radical approach to not Earthdawn necessarily, but a system based off of Earthdawn a little bit, being step system, but based more on going a lot more heavier into the knacks angle of things. That a lot of stuff right now that are talents would be under whatever this would be knacks that are derived off of that. So True Shot in this kind of setup, kind of like Charms from Exalted or something like that, where you have these special abilities that are all based off of a default kind of foundational skill.
Like in the Cortex system, you've got one skill that gets you up to a D6, and after that you can specialize into something, and that gets you a 2-point difference onto a D8, D10, D12,
or something like lines. It's really just a basic if I had the ability to really radically overhaul how Earthdawn approached things. How might I do that? And that's one of those ideas that I had that is just kind of stuffed aside in a little mental folder somewhere and may or may not see the light of day.
In 7th edition.
Again, I don't even know that I would necessarily see it as an Earthdawn thing, but just perhaps as a way of approaching a design of my own.
Fair. Secondary rule set somewhere. Yeah, no, we're all good there. So we'll get through the first...
Basically, at first circle, the archer gets a defensive ability, their attack ability, and 2 abilities that enhance their ability to hit things with their attack ability. I mean, pretty straightforward.
I will take a first circle archer in Earthdawn versus an archer in just about any other game.
Yeah, I mean, there are not
opening.
It's not until you start getting into games that start getting into firearms and gun fu kind of stuff that you can start to pull off some of the things that archers can do in Earthdawn. They're really, especially in fantasy games, don't tend to be quite so much as a ranged focus. Usually, the ranged is a secondary thing, in terms of the stuff that can be pulled off.
Well, and because of the nature of some of the beasties and creatures and horrors in Earthdawn, you don't want to get close. You want a nice archer behind you. Yeah, you want a nice archer behind you going, I'm going to take that out for you. Great. Get it before it gets to me. I'm all good with that. That works quite well over here. So, yeah, second circle, they finally move up and get Mystic Pursuit, which we talked about, I think, previously.
We talked about on the Wizard. Yeah, Mystic Pursuit is what was formerly called Direction Arrow. For archers, it works the same as it always did. It's got a slightly different name.
And so for those of you who are listening in alphabetical order, once all 15 of these are put out and you went Air Sailor and Archer, we talked about Wizard last time, and you are lost. So just listen to that one next. So pause
But
now.
yeah,
go that one, come back.
basically using a connection to their target, they are able to, within range, sort of track or locate their quarry.
Yeah. So I love that talent, and I'm glad everybody gets it at some point. Third circle, they finally move up and get Anticipate Blow, which
Yep.
I think makes more sense to come later than Mystic Pursuit.
Yeah,
That was
I mean
ever
they're
design
not
choice.
they're not really related in any way, but you got to put them in some order.
Exactly.
It kind of connects in with their third circle karma ability, where they get the ability to spend a point of karma on initiative tests. Mm-hmm. Because Anticipate Blow does require the archer to act before their target, and so in terms of initiative order. So again,
Let's
that's
go
something
hand
that sort
in
of
hand.
emphasizes speed. There is some defensive aspect to it as well, because if
Yes.
you can see, the attack is coming, but it also gives you a bonus to attack that target. So it's a little mix of defensive and offensive. Again, it's an ability that they've had for a long time, and
Yes.
aside from some minor details, it more or less works kind of the same as it always has.
Yeah, and Anticipate Blow, I've had to remind my players a number of times, do you have that? Yes, maybe you should use that next round. Because they keep forgetting it exists. I'm like, oh, come on. It's one of the better ones out there. Fourth circle, and again, this actually builds upon, by 3 circles later, long shot. You should
Yeah.
be getting better at what you're doing. And you
Right.
should be able to hit targets further away.
Long shot basically increases the range of the archer's weapon.
Yeah.
It adds a flat bonus. They spend a point of strain, and it adds a flat bonus to the ranges on their weapon. I will have to say that ranges of weapons and movement rates and stuff in 4th edition, which more or less just kind of built off of 3rd, didn't
Yeah.
look at those very closely. They might not necessarily reflect like
Real world
accuracy. They or the ranges of weapons might not really reflect real world, or the ratio of movement rates to ranges. Like, there's a whole lot of interaction that we just frankly didn't look at, because for me it's never been a big deal. I'm not a huge fan of like tracking every yard of stuff. I tend to play very theater of the mind. I am, in fact, fairly, again, sort of leaning towards my own designs, abstracting range quite a bit in terms of things. Yeah, and that was even like after the work on here. But I completely recognize that there are aspects, perhaps, of weapon ranges and movement rates and whatnot that are wonky and maybe don't work together particularly well. And this kind of goes back to 1st edition, even in some respects. I have not analyzed them too closely. I know there are some issues that I have with the movement rates from 1st edition. In terms of the speeds that are potential there. Like, you get a high dexterity elf who is like able to move at world-class sprinter speeds in combat.
Yes.
Whatever. But movement and range and stuff like that in any kind of tabletop game is funky, and just didn't look at it very
Nitpicky.
closely.
Well, no, and some game masters get very nitpicky about it, and I used to be incredibly nitpicky with ranges, because I had power gamers who would try and exploit every single rule they possibly could, and I finally had
Yep.
to tamp it down and go, no, this is exactly 5 yards outside your range, you're SOL. However, now I'm more of the cinematic, does this tell a good story? Is this a really cool thing that people can envision in their minds? This is how the combat played out.
Yeah, for
Because
me,
occasionally a tailwind might come in and take your arrow 5 yards further.
I mean, not
Who cares?
even like, for me, it's not even going like, oh, you get the extra 5 yards from a tailwind or something. It's you've got melee range, like close range, long range, and like I don't even like I wouldn't even necessarily be super. I can understand perhaps in some situations, like in an ambush, or when you're encountering somebody in like an open area where they're far away, and how much time it actually takes to close the distance, and how many, like, I can recognize all of that as being something that doesn't necessarily work
Yeah.
the best. So I recognize that, and again, it's not a defense, but it's just, we didn't look at it that closely because it's not something that was necessarily a high priority for things
Fair.
at the time.
And for those of you who think we are glossing over the difference between bows and crossbows and the automatic set crossbow damages, we'll get to those in another episode. Because there's occasionally the big, huge discussion.
It comes up every so often that why do crossbows have a base strength added on the same way that bows do, or this blah blah blah. Consistency, basically, so that all weapons work the same.
Yes.
And there are always going to be trade-offs where you need to sacrifice realism, and I'm putting scare quotes around that.
Air quotes.
For the for the purposes of gameplay
game balance
at some point.
Yeah.
And if you are someone who wants to be more simulationist in that regard and wants to have your crossbows or your regular bows or whatever try and model them after real world physics or however they work in the real world in terms of draw strength and all sorts of other factors, you want to come up with rules to do that for your own table, that's fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I'm not interested. I'm not particularly interested in it, and don't have I shot bows. I did some archery at summer camp and stuff like that, and I have a basic working knowledge, but I am not in the SCA. Although I know people that are, there are just some aspects of it that for me as a player, as a game master, as a storyteller, as a developer. If it doesn't interest me, I really don't want to
dig into the weeds.
I don't want to get into the weeds of that. I think it adds a level of complexity that is not strictly necessary. I don't think for the purposes of doing what I want the game to do. Other people have different feelings on that. That's fine. But there comes a point where you just need to say enough. This is good enough for the purposes of what we're trying to do, and kind of hand wave it from there.
Yeah. No, one of the other games FOSSA was developing for a role-playing system, I was put in charge of redoing some of the weapons tables, and I got crossbows came across in my purview, and I rewrote some rules on crossbows. It's been 3 years. I will quote you exactly 0 words of that development because I can't remember anything, which is why I wrote it down. So. So that's. I mean, I think we've addressed that well enough. So little 3-minute sidebar.
Yeah. So there's our
3-minute sidebar.
Our novice discipline talents. We've covered those.
Yes. So let's go over the talent options for novice ranks as well. So we've got awareness, which again, everybody gets. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's one of those that if there were archers should get it early. It doesn't feel like there is a better swap in to give it as a discipline talent over something that they already get, except
anything else
possibly long shot. Again, talking about the ranges thing, but it should be something that they have access to. They get the ability to spend karma on perception tests relying on sight, so they may not necessarily need awareness because they will get that little bit better. But it's available. It's a really I think we talked we mentioned. I think just about everybody.
I'd rather them get it as an option at first, second, or third before you force them to wait and get it at fourth.
That's again, if you're gonna do that, then you might need to arrange around other stuff and whatnot.
Yeah. So, and personally, as a game master, if you want to swap out awareness for long shot as the discipline talent, I'm okay with that. Just because they're equally as important, and they can both equally.
So I actually have a talent matrix for Earthdawn 4. Okay,
oh, nice.
So I've got I've got a spreadsheet that has all 15 core disciplines, all of the talents, and it lists either what circle they get it at or what tier it's available as an option.
You gotta love Excel.
It is actually awareness is actually not available to everybody.
Oh,
but
who doesn't get it?
The ones that do not get it is actually makes a certain amount of sense. I think Cavalryman, Sky Raider, Swordmaster, Troubadour oddly doesn't get it. Not sure why. And Warrior.
Fair. Well, if you don't know why, then none of the rest of us do.
I'm not sure.
But we can
But
speculate when
everybody
we get-
else
we can
either
speculate when we get
everybody
there.
else either gets it as a novice option, or if they get it as a talent, they get it at first or second circle. Air Sailor, in fact, is the only one to get it. Air Sailor and Beastmaster both get it at second.
Yeah, because Scout gets it at first.
Scout obviously gets it at first. Thief gets it at first. Elementalist.
Yes.
I'm not sure this is an up-to-date version of this, actually. Elementalist gets it at first.
Well, because awareness is there if you're looking for something in particular.
So, but anyway, it
not
is
just a generic
the
thing.
only one that is more like one of the talents is more broadly available is Avoid Blow.
Rightfully so. Thank you, Josh.
Anyway, so moving on.
No, fair enough. So yes, awareness we're good, and then
Climbing, yeah, it's
I
a
think
movement.
archers should be
It's
able to-
it's a movement ability. Allows you again, kind of playing on the speed and movement aspects of things. It allows the archer to get a higher vantage point, which would be important both for their perception and
Yes.
ability to be able to get a better angle of
clear
attack
shot.
on their target, whether that's climbing up in a tree or from a rooftop, to kind of like take the sniper aspect.
castle parapet,
Or whatever. So climbing obviously makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, firing from an elevated position is always a good idea. So the art of war, you have the higher ground. Climbing is necessary. Creature analysis.
It's
And I agree with
yeah,
that.
it's a perception. Again, maybe not necessarily required, but it's a good like perceptive ability. The ability to observe your target and notice its strengths and or weaknesses. Obviously,
Yes.
very in flavor for an archer.
Because we haven't covered creature analysis before, this is where you get to ask the game master a stat question.
Basically, yeah.
So it's one of those. Oh yeah, what's its death rating, or what's its wound
Or its
threshold?
physical defense.
Does it exactly things like that? Then archers would definitely want
Mm-hmm.
to know, because that way I can spend true shot, use my karma, and make sure that I hit.
Wizards actually get it as well, but
defense.
we didn't talk about what it did when we talked about the wizard.
Right. Sorry.
Because it's an
Yes,
option for
sorry.
wizards also.
We assume by 4th edition, you should know by now. No, I'm just kidding. First impression.
First impression, social talent. Archers are not social discipline the way that Troubadour or Swordmaster or to a slightly lesser extent Beastmaster is. But there should be some social talents available as options to most disciplines.
Everybody. Yeah.
The amount of the amount of them that they get depends on the discipline, but first impression is a useful one to have initially. So it's in their list.
Yeah, and it's never a bad idea because you never know who's going to be in charge of the party and the party makeup from table to table. So I agree. Impressive display.
So this is a reworking of, I think it was called Impressive Shot.
I think you're right.
The idea basically being that you use the talent to do something flashy or significant. William Tell shooting the apple off of his son's head, to make
Yes.
a call back to earlier in the episode, or doing something like that to not so much do to basically make an impression to show off, and whatnot.
Yes.
Impressive display was broadened to basically allow a substitution where you can use your another ability as a social talent. So you would basically use missile weapons, but rather than using it to do damage, you would do it to show off and make a first impression or something along those lines. And it was basically broadened to allow anybody who has impressive display to do anything appropriate for that to show off. Archers get it, obviously. Swordmasters get it, obviously. I think it might be available to a couple of other folks, but really they're the ones who I'm going to show off my skills
Exactly.
and use it as a sort of substitution ability.
Yeah. The best movie reference I can come across, and it's not going to be Robin Hood, by the way, because they always do the usual, I'll shoot one arrow, then I'll split the arrow, the first arrow with the second arrow. Yay, cool. We've seen that 100 times in movies. If you watch the Matt Damon movie, The Great Wall, there's an impressive shot or impressive display in there of him using 3 different arrows. So I'll leave it at that. Go check out the movie. Navigation.
Makes sense from a there's a little bit of cross flavor that you'll get with the archer with the scout. Again, understanding that in the original first edition book, the scout didn't exist in the original release.
Correct.
And so there was a bit more
Yes.
of that flavor, kind of wilderness ranger that showed up in the archer. Those are now options in the archer's kit. Navigation,
Yes.
kind of makes sense in that regard, and it also ties into their perception, their perceptive abilities.
Totally. Yeah, and if you are in the woods a lot, you might want to be able to find your way out of the woods sometimes, and that's part of the archer's path of walking. Speaking of walking, stealthy stride,
and again, sneaky ambush.
If you're in the
Yeah.
woods, yes, totally.
Kind of looking. We didn't really talk about the sniper philosophy, which is something that's in the essay and is being like, oh no, to be a sniper is like a tremendous sin from the point
Yes.
of view of the guy who wrote that original essay. But yeah, there's like, again, a little bit of a stealth aspect. Stealthy stride is kind of the general stealth talent. Mm-hmm. And so whether that's moving silently or just being sneaky in general, again, for the wilderness ranger type archer, it absolutely makes sense as something that would be up their alley.
Yes. Know how to walk in the woods around the dried leaves that'll make noise. Tracking.
You
again,
skipped one.
Leads back to
Throwing weapons.
throwing weapons.
Yeah.
I so did because it was split in half, sorry.
I mentioned throwing weapons earlier being kind of a tough thing, and they should have it because it's another ranged weapon. But again, if you're going to give it to them, if you're going to have it be required, you would want to give it to them early. And there are only so many slots, and there are things that fit better. So it's available there if somebody wants to go with a throwing weapons as to have that as a backup or whatever.
Yeah.
But it just, it should be there. It's not, if you've got missile weapons, throwing weapons seems kind of like a weaker
Version
younger
of it?
brother to that. but it should be available if I don't know that there's necessarily a particularly viable, although that's a really loaded term, build where you're going to be focusing on throwing weapons instead of missile weapons for an archer.
Yeah.
I think it could probably work, but it probably would take a bit of effort and a cooperative game master.
Yes. Once upon a time, again, for the other game I was involved in developing that has not come to fruition as much, we built one called a Lancer, and they used spears instead of bows and arrows or slings or anything like that. So they were primarily focused on the spear as both a close combat weapon and a ranged weapon, and so you could really try and hammer your archer into something along those lines, but it would take it'll take some doing.
It should be there. It works best as an option, just because of the way mechanics work. It's
that, and what would you take out?
Yeah,
because it's not better than the first four.
Again,
discipline.
Like you've only got so many slots. What are you going to put there? So
yeah. So no, I agree that throwing weapons is just one of those by default. It needs to be there, but it's not better than any discipline talent we've otherwise assigned to it. So
not really.
It's option B. No, not really. Then
tracking again goes scout
back to
the sort of scout wilderness archer kind of thing.
Bleed over. Yeah. So done. And then wilderness survival.
Same, more of the same.
Yep. And there we are. So moving on to fifth circle.
They get a cool fifth circle like flavor ability.
Yes, create projectile.
Yep, this is the Ranger Hank with his magic bow from the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. I think Archer's got an ability like this all the way back to first edition, to be honest. But again, it's seems like if you're dealing with a magical archer, it absolutely makes sense that they would have the ability to magically create ammunition for their weapon of choice.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's just, it adds that little cool.
I mean, basically at that point, by the time you become a journeyman, ammunition should really maybe not be such a huge concern.
Yeah, you should stop. What's the term you've used before? Record keeping on that. One less record keeping. Ta-da! Look at that. We've cleared that one up for you. At least Josh did. So yeah, that one's very, very cool. They get the extra karma on damage tests.
Karma
now.
on damage tests made with ranged weapons. That's something that shows up for most of the damage dealing disciplines. Mm-hmm. You get the ability to spend karma on damage or a certain damage type around that point. So
very cool. And then there's the discipline talent spot armor flaw, which I think archers have always needed to have, no matter what. And so get it as early as you can.
It basically, because one of the things is basically, I mean, it is a damage enhancer, but not in the same way that some other disciplines have. And basically it reduces the effective armor of the target, meaning it doesn't cut back so much on the damage that you might do.
Yeah. Spot armor flaw, always a good idea. Sixth circle discipline talent, bank shot.
It allows you to overcome, it allows you to, do trick shots with it, but also to overcome cover.
Yes.
If you've got targets that are hiding behind something, then you can bank the shot off of something else and hit them without having to worry about bonuses to their physical defense because of cover.
Yeah, so I always love that. And it's also kind of impressive, which is right up the archer's alley as well. So
Yep.
it plays off of the impressive display. So seventh circle, and this gets to be the fun part, flame arrow.
Flame arrow. This is a talent that's seen a little bit of change. It was available I think it was available earlier in third edition. I think it was like a third circle, or in first edition. It was like a third circle talent in first edition. But and it works sort of the same here, although in first edition it was basically, it would completely substitute the flame arrow step for your normal weapon damage. And so it was really useful for windling archers, for example,
Yes.
because then they could go with a higher willpower and boost the rank in that talent to be able to overcome their own inherent low damage with a ranged weapon.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be particularly useful for, say, a troll archer who already has a pretty high damage step because of
Their strength.
their strength. It also had some questions about how it might interact with the damage from thread bows and things like that.
Yeah.
I think those are fairly easy to resolve in one sense, but those questions were still there. What Flame Arrow does is it keeps the ability to substitute willpower instead of replace strength with willpower. But basically what it does is acts similar to other damage boosting talents in that it substitutes willpower plus rank for strength in the normal damage calculation for the weapon. So you can still use it to overcome a lower strength if you are a character that is along those lines.
Yes.
But it also more obviously interacts a certain way with enhancements from thread magic and bows and all sorts of other stuff. And at the same time is still, fiery arrows, which is an obvious archer thing
totally.
from stories and whatnot.
Every archer.
So it becomes available. It becomes available later than it has in the past, but it is more clearly a damage enhancing sort of thing.
Yeah.
More along the lines of other similar damage enhancing talents.
Totally. And then you get down to the eighth circle talent, second shot. And I know
You can now
do two and fire two and one.
Yeah, it's basically you get an additional attack. You get your standard, and then you can fire again. It's pretty straightforward. Again, the other sort of damage disciplines, the combat disciplines, start picking up their second attack abilities in the journeyman tier, whether that's second weapon, so they can go dual wield, or get second attack, so they can hit a second time with their primary weapon, or something like that.
Yeah.
Archers get second shot.
So, and can they pick up second shot as a skill? Because just in case somebody wants it earlier than eighth, they might be able to do that whole...
Second shot is, I believe, available as a skill, but it is a...
Journeyman skill.
It is a journeyman tier skill, so it is more expensive to learn. You can't get it at character creation, because that is limited to novice tier skills only. And it is more expensive than it is to get the talent. You can still learn it early, comparatively.
Yeah, at fifth, if you get there.
Well, you can, if you're willing to take the time and spend the legend to do it, you can pick it up.
Yeah.
If you can find somebody to teach you and you want to spend the time and money and legend to learn it, you can pick it up early on. That's one of the advantages of skills.
Yes.
But it's still like the amount of legend that you would need to spend to get decent at it is going to be nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah. No, it's a significant amount of investment in legend points to do so. So I was clearing that up for anybody who was like, why didn't it come earlier? Well,
because in general, like journeyman tier is where you start getting your broad-based multiple attacks.
Yes.
There are some abilities that grant you a second attack in certain circumstances at novice tier, air dance being the example that immediately comes to mind, that if you are able to act fast enough, you do get an additional attack on your target.
Yes.
But trying to sort of cut back on the crazy amount of like multiple attack things that show up, because they didn't really, they started to show up around the same point in first edition.
Yeah.
There's nothing like, revolutionary there in terms of fourth edition.
Not at all. Besides, I think if the archer can do the impressive display, or your missile weapons by this point is high enough up with the mystic aim, you can do more. You can hit him easier, do more damage on it, and you can still.
Yeah, I mean,
get better
basically,
at it. So spotting armor
thing that
flaw
came in
makes more sense to be earlier.
not even that, but talking about the what extra attacks do in terms of resolution, like play resolution, is that because you have an attack test, you have potentially an active defense like a void blow or something like that, and then potentially a damage test.
Yeah.
So every time that you add an additional attack onto somebody's attack cycle, you are doubling or tripling the number of rolls that are involved.
Yes.
And that just extends the amount of time that it takes to resolve your actions in combat. And that is a thing, potentially.
Yeah,
so
that is.
I mean, you've got 15 circles. I don't think you need to rush to multiple attacks right out of the gate.
Fair. No. And that's just to satisfy anybody's question as to why maybe second shot didn't come earlier. So had to cover that one. All right. So journeyman options. We have conversation, a social skill.
We had talked about social skills. Yeah, again, conversation is sort of the most broadly applicable general social skill. So if we're going to give them social abilities, that's probably one of the better ones to give.
First impression and then conversation. Hi, you've just met me. Now let's talk. And, you have to negotiate your fee sometimes on occasion. And then they get danger sense, which I always...
Yeah, that's a perceptive ability. Allows you to potentially spot or react to ambushes or other sort of dangers. Again, it's a combination of perception and speed.
Yeah.
So it plays very nicely with the archer's typical shtick. So
yeah, not to be confused with the spidey sense. So, and then we go on to distract, which again is
that's an interesting choice. It's available at journeyman tier, where more of the disciplines that are along those lines will typically get it in the novice levels.
Yes.
But it basically allows the archer at range to maybe attract the attention of a target and make openings for their friends to hit them with blindside bonuses and stuff like that.
Especially if you have your flame arrow.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it's basically making yourself a more inviting target to open up opportunities for your companions. It's an interesting approach for an archer to take, especially where they would have the distance and speed and defensive capability to not necessarily be penalized by the secondary effects of that, where your own physical defense is lowered.
Yeah, I like it because that way you can use your archer as a decoy somewhere.
Yep.
Especially with the flame arrow, they can garner some attention. I picture an archer standing in an open field of wheat against the enemy, up on the hillside, and he just walks out there, turns on his flaming arrow, and he's just aiming it at the enemy, and meanwhile, your rest of your party is broadsiding them or blindsiding them because they're looking at your archer in the middle of the field. What's he doing out there? And then they get bum rushed. So that works for me.
So,
etiquette.
Your other broadly useful social talent.
Exactly. Evidence analysis, which I think goes along with creature analysis.
Yeah, it's we talked about this with the wizard. It's the CSI talent. Obviously very suited for the perceptive abilities of the archer, if it is one who is going along those lines. Definitely, I think there is very definitely potential for a detective approach to an archer. Like you could go with that kind of philosophy towards them.
I like Hawkeye from the Avengers in that exact same realm. I see things better from far away. And I can discern certain things maybe other people could not. So I like the evidence analysis because again, they are perceptive because they sometimes have to find their quarry. If they're maybe hunting a rabbit in the middle of the forest, they have to figure out where it went, what it's doing, and so forth. So that goes along with the hunting aspect of
but also being able to see where the clues point. Yes. Is another sort of target metaphor that can be drawn there.
I agree. Putting all the pieces together. Resist taunt.
One of the trio of active defenses. They don't get it as a discipline talent; they get it as an option.
Yeah, if you want to take it, because it's sometimes if you're in that kind of party where you are getting taunted a lot, or people are throwing those things at you, or you're in enough battles to get battle bellow and battle shout that are reducing your social defense, then yes, by all means. I've not run a lot of adventures where my players would want to take the resist taunt. So, just me, just the tables. That's how it works. Speak language. always useful.
Speak language, yeah, always useful as a potential option.
Yeah. The last two are my favorites, but we'll get to them in a second.
Well, then we get Steel Thought.
Steel Thought. Again.
Which is, again, your other active defense.
Yes, and since you are a slightly combat-oriented character, yes, need to have that one. Stopping aim, I think, is one of my favorites of all time for archers.
Yeah, it works as an option. It is a nice, like, you draw a bead on the opponent and you get them to freeze.
Yes.
Basically.
I think that's one of the cooler visual aspects that players should see.
Yeah, magically reinforce that the target freezes where they are when you paint them with your
Mystic aim.
When you paint them with your laser sight.
Exactly. Oh, I should stop moving now. Yes, you should. And then Tiger Spring, which is just an initiative
and
booster.
Tiger Spring, which is a straight up initiative booster, useful again if you've got to anticipate blow, you want to be acting fast in the round. Mm-hmm. It will help. Again, the archer may wants to generally be acting earlier in the round so that they can maybe move into a more advantageous position, get out of range of potential close combat attacks that will be coming in against them, be able to identify appropriate targets and provide support where it is needed within the battlefield.
Yeah, and so that is essentially the first 8 circles of the Earthdawn Survival Guide podcast on how to play an archer and what all those talents are there for.
Kind of going over what they're for. When you're playing an archer, the archer can be maybe a little bit more of a tactician. Mm-hmm. Your ability to move and again, with our understood discussion of ranges and movement rates and stuff like that.
Yes.
That your ability to move and perceive and your speed and dexterity and ability to see things makes a good tactician, if you don't have a scout, they make a great scout.
Yes.
In the traditional sense of the term, mm-hmm. in terms of the one who can see farther and whatnot.
And walks point on the trail.
That walks point, depending on the flavor of things. But yeah, they can, depending on the makeup of the group, they don't tend to be particularly like social mm-hmm. characters, but they can be very effective leaders if they are the kind that will kind of get to the point and make a choice and a direction for the group to go.
Yes.
There are, I think, other disciplines that maybe more naturally fit that role in some respects than the archer, mm-hmm. but the archer can make a good leader if they've got the personality to go along with it.
Yeah.
But they also can be somewhat more solitary and don't necessarily rely quite so much on having the support of people around them the way that, say, an air sailor would. But yeah, generally, the way to be an effective archer, and this is the case really for any of the disciplines where the bulk of their toolkit is focused on damage, on combat damage, mm-hmm. is to basically know what your talents can do and how to most effectively combine them to get the most out of that.
Agreed.
Like, you don't want to forget that you've got Mystic Aim and True Shot and Spot Armor Flaw mm-hmm. and, things like that allow you to basically stack bonuses onto your base attack test so that you can then get higher results and cause more damage.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to be a strain sponge.
Yeah. Basically, you don't quite have the damage survivability, the toughness necessarily of a mm-hmm. of a warrior or sky raider or swordmaster who will basically get through all of their strain costing combat enhancement abilities by just having a lot of damage to be able to go through.
Yes.
The archer doesn't quite have that resilience, but they make up for it by the fact that they really shouldn't be in situations very often where somebody is going to be hitting them hard with heavy weapons.
Yeah. They would see that target and get out of the way first.
The archer, you want to, again, talking about the sort of like the tactician, you have range, and quite often it will be your job to soften up or cause problems for the ranged capabilities of whatever you might be going up against. Mm-hmm. If you're going up against other people that have range capability, targeting enemy spellcasters
Yeah.
For example, or other ranged capability. The advantage also with enemy spellcasters is that they tend not to be as heavily armored.
Yes.
And so boosting your abilities with Mystic Aim or True Shot when appropriate
Even long shot. Yeah.
to enhance your damage and do that. You know, even picking up and taking some options, like if you want to go a route where you are using throwing weapons. You know, the bola is really nice as a knockdown entanglement weapon to hinder or hamper your foes. Is something that you can do there as a backup. You know, you can the archer does not get any close combat talents in their kit, at least in the first in novice or journeyman tiers. So it might be worth considering, depending on the size of your group, whether you may want to pick up a rank or two of melee weapons. Because you'll have a high dexterity anyway.
As a skill?
Pick up a rank or two of it as a skill.
Yes.
Just to, and like carry a short sword or something as a backup in order to have that in case things go south and you're not able to fight, you know, to use your ranged weapon effectively.
Sometimes you're in a tavern, in a bar. Doesn't necessarily.
Sometimes you're in a tavern. But generally speaking, if you have the capability to not be in close combat, mixing it up, whether that's getting the higher ground or just simply moving, taking enhanced movement to
back out of the fight and get to a distance.
Back out away. Actually, I'm noticing now that we've gone through this that sprint is not an option at all for archers in any of this.
Yeah, you're right.
And that is something that they had in the past that allowed them to move even faster. It's not even actually a disciplined talent for anybody anymore, looking at least the matrix that I've got here.
And sprint is not available as a skill.
No, because it's a magical.
Yes. I was
again. This goes into movement rates and stuff like that.
I was telling people
and
who
just
were
the
listening
way
to the
that
podcast who couldn't reference their book immediately.
I mean, it's sprint. The sprint talent is a magical enhancement to speed. Again, we talked about movement rates and stuff like that, but yeah, that's the archer. In one respect, is actually not a bad discipline for a new player because it is fairly straightforward in terms of what they do. They get a bow and they shoot stuff, and then they can take some options that go either focus on the wilderness archer scout route, or maybe the perceptive analytical with awareness and creature analysis and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They can even pick up some social stuff with first impression or impressive display, and be kind of more of a showman, fancy pants archer.
Or if you have a veteran player who's, I can't say, looking for something new, this new take on the archer, by the way, has a lot of leadership qualities to it. And so maybe you have got one veteran player and a couple of newbies, because we've had some emails from people who've written in saying, I've got one or two veterans and a whole bunch of newbies. Great. Have one of the veterans defer and take an archer on as their discipline, and they can be the de facto leader of the group, because this has a whole bunch of leadership quality talents to it.
Potentially, yeah.
And so that can
and being able to be at a distance and be able to see the whole battlefield, for example, and be able to coordinate. If you're going to be going that route, picking up skills like tactics,
yes,
or leadership, I think is also available as a skill.
I think you're right.
They're not in the talent options available early on, but those are certainly both valid options to pick up as skills that can enhance the capabilities of your group. Leadership, I think, is a journeyman tier skill.
You are correct.
Tactics is novice tier, but
yeah.
those are both definitely worthwhile looking into if you don't have better things to do with your skills.
Absolutely.
So there's the archer.
Yeah, one of my players in every new game that he ever plays in decides to take the ranged character first. So his first character he ever made was an archer, just so he could do exactly that. I want to see the whole battlefield. I don't want to get close to anything because I don't know what I should and should not touch in combat. So arrows are great from a distance of 5 feet and 50 feet. That works. So he always plays an archer very first thing. So that's a recommendation here as well. And your survival guide tip from the Survival Guide podcast. So any final thoughts now that we're an hour and 15 in?
Yeah, no, I think that wraps it up pretty well. I know there was somebody who was saying that they were going to send in some stuff about archers, because we hadn't done them yet, and we did not get an email from him. I'm sure that not long after this episode comes up, we will hear from him with lots of we could hear the angry hammering on the keys about all the stuff that we missed, or that he disagrees with us in terms of things, and crossbows. But no, that's fine. If you want to, and he can send his angry screed.
Yes.
Or supportive missive to us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. See, how's that for a segue?
Exactly. Totally.
And that goes for anybody else out there who is listening to us here today.
I love your transition material, Josh. I love it.
I like to. I entertain myself where I can. And, as always, spread the word. We've got I can tell from our numbers that we've got a regular core of solid listeners, and we appreciate all of you, whether you send us email or not. And the people who share the link and like retweet it and like and all the rest of that.
Yeah,
so
because I'm not an email sender, but I am a word of mouth sharer. So I will tell people you should listen to this podcast. So I'm one of those people myself. So if you don't email us, great, but spread the word in any which way you possibly can. Otherwise, folks, I thank Josh for keeping the time and keeping the flame burning for all of us out here.
The flame arrow burning.
Flame arrow burning. Yes, the arrow of light. So otherwise, folks, it is now time for you to go make your own archery legend.